and welcome to Fuel Talk. I'm joined today by Peter Bell, who's Chief Operating Officer of Cox Automotive Europe. So welcome, Peter.
Hi, James. How are you?
Really well, thank you. Really well.
Good.
And a subject close to our hearts, I know today is we're going to talk about is mental health and what that means to us, but also to Cox. So I know you're the board sponsor for mental health within Cox Automotive. So just talk to us in terms of what you've observed since you've taken up that responsibility.
Well, I guess where to start? I think we can all probably agree that 2020 has been a year like we've never seen before, and probably our mental health and well-being has been stretched like never before, as we've all gone through our different experiences and journeys with the pandemic, with our professional lives and with our family lives and with our friends. So I picked up this role at the beginning of the year, and it was something we'd already been focusing on as a business that I felt was the right thing to do, because I guess our culture in Cox Automotive is one of care anyway. So a focus on mental health and well-being is just intrinsic within that, and really important to support team members. And then as the year has kind of gone on, I guess the importance of this has just risen more and more. And then that's culminated most recently with World Mental Health Day, which obviously took place last Saturday, the 10th of October. So we'd already started the journey. We've started doing lots, which I guess we're going to talk about today. Mental health first aid as being a big investment that we're making within the business. But then World Mental Health Day gave us a real springboard to just sort of kick on to the next level with our support for team members.
So in terms of celebrating World Mental Health Day, I know that within Cox Automotive, we've had a number of initiatives, and including a guest speaker at last week's leadership call. So just tell us a bit more about what we've been involved in terms of what we've done for World Mental Health Day.
Yeah, absolutely, James. So World Mental Health Day was a great opportunity to sort of focus the conversation again with our leadership team. So last Friday, we invited all of our senior leaders from across Europe to join a Teams call with a guest, Andy Salkeld, who is the author of Life is a Four-Letter Word. If you've not read the book, Andy tells his story as a mental health as a survival guide for professionals, really. Andy shared his experiences and some of the pressures and issues that he'd experienced, how that played on his mental health and where it led him. I won't spoil the book or try to do justice to his story here, because it's both a complex journey and I guess the way he tells the story just makes it really resonate with anybody that's experienced any of the environments or close to the environments that he worked in. I mean, the point for us of having Andy join us was really just to try and open up the conversation in another way. World Mental Health Day is a great opportunity to drive some focus, but clearly this can't be a once-a-year conversation. So we'd already been talking to our leaders and team members about the importance of focusing on our mental health and the mental health of our teams. But it was a great chance to focus again, and we've been doing that through Andy's presentation, through a series of blogs from different team members and leaders on our intranet, the sharing of resources from charities like Mind and Ben. We've also asked team members to take a One Pledge initiative, so something that they're going to commit to make or break a mental health habit, to try and improve their individual situation. But we've also tried to have a bit of fun with it as well, because although it's a very serious subject, people engage with it in a different way, and you can have some fun around this type of conversation, because mental health isn't just about negatives, it's also about the positives, and that's really important to me that we focus on those. So we've done some other things, like have a happy half hour, which is a sort of a play that we're putting in place to allow colleagues to reconnect. So somebody they might have lost contact with as we're now working at home that they might previously have seen in the office, somebody they might want to reach out to understand a little bit more about their role, or to try and work together on a project. So just creating a bit of license for people to have a bit of fun and just a social interaction without it necessarily being driven by a formal work meeting. Another thing we did was the Cox Classics Happy Playlist, which we've put together a crowdsourced Spotify playlist. For me, music works wonders with my mood. It always lifts me. So we thought that was a great way of getting people to contribute and also have a bit of fun during the working day. Music is a great way of lifting the spirits.
No, absolutely right. Absolutely. I was lucky enough, and funnily enough, on World Mental Health Day, I'd ordered the book from Andy, and I actually took the day off, or the morning off rather, and I actually read it because it popped through the letterbox of the morning, so it was quite timely.
Perfect.
Sorry, I think.
Go on.
I was just going to say, I think it's really important, as you say, about being open, because there's a real stigma around mental health, which I think his personal approach and style does take on. But I think I relate to a lot of the, certainly in our industry, and I know inclusion and diversity is very close to Cox Automotive's hearts, and as well as yours and mine. But I think that whole piece around it being very male dominated as an industry, and almost a weakness or a stigma that there's a weakness to talk about not being okay, and the fact that it is okay not to be okay.
Yeah,
I think it's really important. But sorry, I interrupted.
No, I mean, to your point, I think it's important that we give mental health more airtime, and that's what we're trying to do as a business. So as you say, I mean, the environment that we work in does have a certain demographic, and within that demographic, it can be quite hard to open up to colleagues or to a line manager, for example. You know, I think historically, if somebody had potentially tried to discuss a mental health issue, and if I describe that as, you know, being under pressure or stressed, might have been words we'd used in the past. It was seen as a sign of weakness. What we think is really important, and clearly, you know, activities like World Mental Health Day are designed to do, is break that stigma. As you say, a phrase that Alison Fisher, our Chief People Officer, uses all the time with us is that it's okay not to be okay. You know, I think no matter how dialed in anybody appears to be, you know, in whatever profession, whether in our space of automotive, whether it be a professional athlete, whether it be somebody in the media or a politician, you know, any line of work or profession, you know, we may appear that we've got it really down. We know what's going on. We're in total control, but more often than not, below the surface, there's a lot more going on. And I think during this time of COVID-19, it's absolutely amplifying those mental health issues. Now, for us as a business, I think where we are today is something we can all be proud of, because, you know, we really live and breathe our values. So there's a natural connection in this type of conversation, particularly around our value of doing the right thing. And doing the right thing is having the conversation. It's being prepared to listen to people, being willing to accept that it's okay not to be okay, and wanting to help people. Because, as I've said, you know, our culture is one of care. Our business is ultimately about people. Most businesses are, you know, people increasingly these days in most sectors are the differentiator. Why would you not want to have the conversation? Why would you not want to help people through a difficult time? And the reality is, yes, there is still a stigma we have to overcome, but mental health touches more of us than most would ever care to admit. At least 1 in 4 people. So realistically, all of us will either be touched or know someone very close to us who will be touched by a mental health issue in our lifetime. So again, why would we not want to help one another through a difficult period?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that authenticity which I really admire in terms of our leadership, in terms of talking about it and making sure, as you say, there's no, you know, whilst there is a stigma in society, perhaps. I mean, I was actually fortunate enough to be able to ask to present to an industry forum around my own personal mental health journey, if you like, within the industry, which I was open enough to do. But it was frightening, some of the statistics, as you say, in terms of the people, you know, 75% of people who have a diagnosable mental health issue never seek treatment. 3/4 of people, and as you say, that touches everybody's friends, family, and colleagues, of course, which we often spend a lot of time, even though we're not physically working with each other at the moment, as in next to each other. And that you know, in itself, as you said earlier, creates its own challenges, because if you are working remotely, how can you pick up on those, you know, maybe telltale signs of someone seeming a bit quiet, a bit withdrawn? And that's, I mean, I kind of guess that takes me on to the next point, because, you know, you and I both are fortunate enough to have been, you know, from a Cox Automotive perspective, you know, we've been trained as mental health first aiders, which we were on the same course, which I know you and I have shared some commentary about. But it was, you know, for me personally, that has transformed my life in terms of how I reference myself as well as others. But, you know, do you just give us a bit of a background, Pete, in terms of that training initiative and where it's going within?
Yeah, absolutely, James. Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess, you know, as we said, we joined a number of colleagues to undertake a mental health first aid course. And, you know, I think we're all familiar with the typical first aid course, which is all physically focused, you know, whether we do that in the workplace. I coach my son's football team. So, you know, part of that is that you have to have a first aid qualification that's regularly renewed. And, you know, physical injuries are perhaps easier to identify, easier to deal with. You hope you don't have to, but first aid is always focused on physical, but increasingly, we have to be focused on mental health as well as physical, and it is harder to spot. And as we said, there can be a stigma that either inhibits people's willingness or feeling, not even being willing, perhaps even feeling that they can broach the subject with somebody else. So what we've decided in Cox Automotive is that we want to have a real focus on mental health first aid. So we've made a strategic commitment in 2020 to really drive into that space. So we've now got over 40 first aiders qualified, including ourselves. We have around another 16 going through training before the year ends. So we'll be closing in on 60 trained mental health first aiders by the end of the year, and that work will continue. I guess the focus is really around giving help, giving support, helping people find the right routes to get professional help, because that's really what it's about. It's about being able to identify signs, offering non-judgmental support and offering non-judgmental guidance to get somebody to a professional who can help them, whatever the situation. I mean, personally, I found that going into the training, I thought I knew some things around the subject, perhaps a little bit more informed than some because of the work I'd been doing, but still, honestly, quite nervous about how I would be able to help. What was my context or my frame of reference if somebody was talking to me about an issue? How would I help them? And so I wanted to feel perhaps as more confident as confident as I might do in a physical first aid situation, having done a training course in a mental health situation. And I think the course was really, really good for doing that. I mean, still, it's the start of a learning journey, and going on a course does not mean you've got all of the answers by any stretch, but it's a way of us getting more help out in the business and offering some independence from the typical line manager direct report conversation, again, that traditionally would have happened. Somebody would have spoken to their boss about the way they were feeling. Or they would look to a friend in the office environment or wherever they work to kind of confide. The idea of having mental health first aiders throughout the business, and what we're going to be doing is expanding that into Europe and creating a network of mental health first aiders for both the support of the mutual support of first aiders, but also to broaden the coverage, is really provide another outlet for people to have that conversation confidentially and with confidence. So really it comes back to those same things again. It's about maintaining the ability for people to have a conversation, trying to break down the stigma, emphasizing it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to reach out for help. I guess the other thing I'd mention was talking about that, this isn't just a one-dimensional play for us, that we get a whole group of people qualified as mental health first aiders and we've ticked a box. So again, we're trying to take a response that's multifaceted. So as well as doing that, we're drawing on resources of charities in this space like Mind and Ben, and we're making those available to team members through our intranet. We're speaking constantly to our leaders about how they can support their teams and open up these materials to their teams. We've also been doing, as I say, some of the fun stuff, but we've chosen Mind as a charity partner this year. We've conducted a whole host of fundraising activities because those create opportunities for inclusion, participation, some sort of, health, I'd say physically healthy endeavors. And we know there's a strong link between physical and mental health. So we had our Snowed In challenge last year. We had team members and the board all climbed peaks in Snowdon. Can't do that this year because of the lockdown. So everybody that participated undertook their own steps-based challenge. We continued that in September, and again, trying to get colleagues out and about and sort of in the fresh air and just taking some time out to do something positive. Two of our board members, Alison Fisher and Craig Maley, ran the London Marathon and raising funds for Mind. And we're also trying to work ever more closely in an alliance with Ben, the automotive industry charity, who have some amazing resources and do some fantastic work. And we want to raise the profile of Ben and what they can offer to team members, because it's not all about just what we can do as a business. There's a whole host of support out there for people to draw upon.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And being candid, it's really interesting the comment you make about it's not one-dimensional, because the culture of this business has shone through in the lockdown and the pandemic that we've all and our customers have had to experience. And it was interesting. I'd I actually got someone question on our email footers. We now have the icon that we're trained mental health first aiders, and it was actually at a conference I was co-chairing, and one of the individuals that was speaking out of the conference contacted me and said, look, I saw this in your email footer, would you mind talking to me about it? So I did, and in actual terms, she wrote a blog about Cox Automotive and our drive and support for mental health. But interestingly, I had some feedback on social media saying, well, this is just a fad, everyone's jumping on mental health, World Mental Health, Global Mental Health Days, and I said, well, actually that initiative was launched in the early 90s, and I must admit, social media has probably helped raise awareness of that initiative in terms of the annual marking of it. But in terms of going forward, Pete, I guess what are your views in terms of we've talked about another 16 mental health first aiders, the rollout into Europe. What's your kind of closing? Because I appreciate you're very busy and you've given us your time. What's your closing view in terms of mental health, in terms of where you're going to take it as board sponsor, or anything you'd like to shout out to anyone that's listening to or watching this?
I mean, it's interesting that you had those reactions, and I have to say, I sort of recognise where it's coming from. I don't agree with it in terms of that. Well, it's a fad.
Yeah.
I think we're better these days at understanding what it is. Like with many things, if you look back to the past years, whether it be physical or mental illness, there wasn't a level of understanding or necessarily openness about what life can throw at us that there is now. And there certainly wasn't the willingness to talk about it. Now, that doesn't, for me personally, the more that we have the conversation, the more opportunity there is to help. And if you can help one person, then it's worth having the conversation. As I said before, no matter how, I'll use the phrase again, dialed in, how you look at someone and think, my word, they've actually got it down. They've got no problems at all. You don't know that. None of us know that. We don't know what's going on behind the surface, and I speak for myself. There are times where, I absolutely need to talk to somebody, and great value in my friends that I can speak to. And sometimes you just need to share. Sometimes you need somebody to tell you to, what you're worried about. Don't be so silly, and just give you some context. That's at a normal level. That's at day by day stuff. When it goes beyond day by day stuff and is becoming a true mental health issue, people need help. It's not just, well, it's a fad to feel this way or that way. It's a real thing, and people need help and support to get through it. So for us to, I suppose, come back specifically to your question, what's next? Well, we're going to keep driving at this stuff because it's not going away. As we talked yesterday, there were more announcements from the government about the next stages of restrictions in the UK. One of the things we've talked about is that, the first 6 months in the spring and the summer was a very different context for lockdown to now going into the winter, with the fatigue that's built up, with the difference of the seasons, the restrictions on people being able to get out and see people and talk and interact with friends and family potentially, so it's going to be a tough 6 months ahead. So we're going to continue to champion, to educate and equip team members with knowledge and resources that they need to help themselves and to help one another through this. Because as I said, it's okay not to be okay. Not everyone is okay 100% of the time. And when it's not okay, you need help, and you need to feel confident that you can reach out to somebody and do that without it having a stigma or having some negative consequence. So, as a business, we want to create that positive environment for our team members. As I say, we take pride in our culture. It's not a fad. We're not just doing it because it's World Mental Health Day and we're going to do it and then we're not going to talk about it for a year. It's a 365-day-a-year conversation for us, and just intrinsic to the way that we work.
Yeah, no, that's great, Pete. And I think, from my perspective, looking at our leadership, our group board, I've said it earlier in our chat, it's inspirational to see, that level of passion and openness, because, we all do look to leaders and in terms of your sponsorship, thank you from my colleagues, team members, to you for doing that. And, we're here to support, as we said, from our first aid perspective. But I guess the shout out is for anybody that's listening or watching, if they want to know more, there's a number of different places you can go to and look, but open up, talk, and we'll be there together to support. So Pete, thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I know you're really, really busy, so
no problems, James. No problems. I'm proud to sponsor this initiative, and if I could just steal something from Andy's talk to us on Friday, one of the things he said was, be kind to yourself and others. I think it's a great piece of advice, and in this context that we've talked about today, so important. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and you never know when you'll need somebody to talk to. So, don't be closed to this subject.
Fantastic. What a way to end. Thanks, Pete.
All right, no problem, James. See you soon.